Welcome back to Spotlight. I've been joined by Dr. Cindy George. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
It's always have a good discussion when you're
Yes.
here. You heard the conversation. I was just talking to Sean Rose about some of the issues, the stories that's going to be in the news this week. The accidents,
Yeah,
motorcycle
tragic
accidents, young people losing their lives, getting injured. I mean, of the couple of things, the families dealing with those issues. How do we support those families?
Yeah, I think as a community and as extended family and as a community, I think we can begin to, really support these families by letting them know that their loved ones are no longer with us, but their lives still live on. And I know that might sound a bit cliche-ish, but that's what we want to do. We want to begin to help these families to begin to grieve. I always say to my clients that have had persons that have passed on, we need to grieve because grieving is a process. And sometimes some people might come and they might say, oh, it's okay. And then if they're crying, they might want to hug them and, but let them cry. Because that may be the process of how they allow that grieving process to happen. Some do it whether it be emotionally through crying. Some do it whether it be extending to the other person, whether looking through photos. I've heard people say that, even being in the room where they were, things like that. So I think as extended family and as a community, we really want to allow the families, their lives do continue, even though they're not in our presence. And you just don't want to just, they died and shut up and forget about it, especially when it's something so tragic. So that's one thing I will say. We want to allow them to that sense of that grieving process. Because once we do that, I think it allows you to then be able to accept. And I know when I say accept, somebody might say, well, you can never forget. I'm not saying forget. I'm saying we're able to now accept that this has happened. We are aware of it, and then we acknowledge it and we say, okay, this has happened, and now I then have to move. I then have to continue to be a mother to my other children or a father. I have to continue to be an employee to my employer and so forth. So I think once we're allowed...
Life goes on.
Life goes on. Thank you. Life goes on. Yeah.
Now, I'm looking at some of these accidents, and I'm looking at our behavior as human beings in a society. And I'm thinking to myself that, whether or not we've lost the respect for life that we once had, and have we come to a point where we are so competitive, we have gotten our egos have grown to the point where we feel invincible. Technology is such, that. Right. You could have anything instantly. You could contact anywhere in the world. You could move from one place and I'm envisioning pretty soon you'll be able to blink yourself across
space.
Like you look at pictures like Star Trek and you think that was impossible. I remember when we were looking at Get Smart with the cell phone on his shoe, right? And who would have thought that this here little instrument anywhere in the world I can make a phone call from anywhere I am, So are we getting disrespectful towards God, towards creation, towards life, towards rules and regulation, authority, those kinds of things?
That's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't, I tend to veer away from a lot of the negative, but I wouldn't say that, these young persons are, that we don't have a respect for God or life. I think what's happening...
I'm not talking about young people alone. I'm talking
Just
about
everyone in general.
All of us in the society, in the BVI, and you look at television and you hear the news, and it's like it's around the world. It seems like.
Yeah. No, I think it's just a matter of that technology is evolving and we're evolving with it. And I think what's happening is that sometimes, we don't recognize, or maybe we may not know the line, where that line is, and we always cross that line. Let's take, for example, just risky behaviors. And I know we're not necessarily talking about young persons, but even risky behaviors in terms of speeding, not wearing helmets, things like that. just a lot of things that we need to take precautions of to protect our safety, but we don't. And I think a lot of times we just go ahead and we cross that line and we evolve. That's just like you said with the cell phone. It's out there, it's new technology, and we feel like we have all of these things and we're moving, we're doing all these things and we're evolving with it and not recognizing we have limits. We're not mortal. We're not immortal. We're mortal.
Yeah.
We can die. So I think we don't put ourselves in that bracket. We kind of lump ourselves into that whole package and not realize we are separate. I'm not a cell phone. If that cell phone falls, it may not break, and you can still use it again. But if we fall from a building, pretty much we're gone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of times we don't recognize that we're not like those machines. We're humans. And
life is more fragile than we think.
Life is more fragile than we think. And because things are evolving, we kind of think we're evolving too, and we have that sense of, how should I say, invincibility. Just like you said. And there's so many other things that I can say, but to me, that's just a general, broad sense of it,
Yeah.
And we don't make that distinction, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
certainly it seems as we
Yeah.
don't. And then, of course, we had the tragedy with the storm, the floods in
St. Vincent.
down in the Caribbean, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica. Families losing their homes, and even the tsunami, not the tsunami, the hurricane in Asia a few months ago, right? Where
right.
hundreds of thousands of people were homeless and thousands of people died and so on. Those events, how do we manage those events as human beings?
I know. That's a good question. These are life-changing events. And it's something that you say, well, how do I move on? And I think a lot of times we just have to do exactly that. Sometimes I tell my clients, guess what? You may just have to go back to the beginning. And what does that mean? And the interesting thing is, do you know where the beginning is? And when I say go back to the beginning, I mean, how do we begin to not only rebuild our lives, but rebuild ourselves? We talked about parents who were grieving. How do I go back to now, after I've lost my child, after having grieved, how do I go back to a sense of normalcy? What will my normal be like from here?
How do you accept those things, those events, and all those things in your
Right.
life that cause trauma and anxiety?
Right, and so for these persons in these horrific environmental disasters, I think one of the things that they have to do is begin to say that now, how do I now go back to normalcy? And I think for those persons who had a good sense of what their normalcy was, it's easier. We find some people, 50% of the population, oh yeah, okay, that happened a year ago and we're good, we rebuild and whatever. These are people that have had that solid foundation psychologically, and they were then able to say, you know what, this was a part of life. Naturally, we live in a region where these things can happen, and then I just have to know, prior to that, I had a good footing of who I was. I can go back and pick up the pieces. I know who I was prior to that. I was a mother, I was a father, I was X, Y, or Z, and I had that psychological strength to do it. But then maybe another individual who may not have been so put together. Can you imagine now that external factor coming in? It's harder now for them to rebuild because that foundation was not as put together. Am I making sense?
Solid, yes.
It's not as solid. And so I think a lot of times that's why we see persons years after still struggling. It's like, my God, you knocked me down, and I don't know how to get back up. Yeah. So it's so important. It's so important to have that sense of who you are. And we, Laura, I always go back to that. And because it helps us when those external factors come in. Because they will, whether it be in the form of a relationship, a divorce, a death of a family, a natural disaster, as the hurricanes in the Caribbean islands. But it's an external. It's something outside of us.
How important is our faith in rebuilding, that rebuilding process, or that accepting process? Our faith in God and the supreme power
Right.
of the divine.
Very important. And for me, I always try to be very neutral when I counsel my clients. When I speak of faith, I do not introduce any denomination. I'm very careful not even to say the word God or Jesus or anything like that. I introduce faith as a spiritual connectedness, a higher belief in something. And my client can call it whatever they want. They can call it chair or table. I run with that. Okay? And so that is very important because it then allows you that sense of believing in something else other than what's around you, other than your strength to pick this table up. You know there's some other thing that can get you to take that table up other than the fact that I had dinner this evening. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's where I try to definitely push that with my clients too, because I work from a wellness and holistic perspective. You know, even with something like depression, grieving, I always go back to that faith. Well, what is your belief that you can get through this? Because you came to see me? Got to be something else.
Yeah.
I can help you, but
You
there
have to
be something else.
feel like you can overcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have a Helping Professionals
Yes.
conference.
First annual. And you
First-
notice I said first
Yeah.
because we're going to have the second one next year.
First
Yeah.
annual. You'll be going with it continually as long as you could go.
Long as I can go.
Yeah. Well, I don't know which question to ask you first. Why?
Why?
Yes.
The why.
Why?
Well, that's a good question. Well, you know, I've been back here in the BVI for a while now. And since I started my practice, I've tried to reach out to, various colleagues. I talk with them, get a sense of how they're feeling in terms of their practices, whether it be school counselors, other mental health workers. And over the course of the years that I've been here, I said, I've been observing. That's what I do. I observe, as a clinician, by training. And I said, I want to help. I want to help these persons. I want to give back. And I also want to help them to help the persons that they work with in the community. And so that really was the impetus of this whole idea of having something like that. How can I help my colleagues? How can I even help myself as a professional to better serve the residents of the BVI? And so that's really the why, where it came from, the sparking point of that. And I said to myself, I have so many resources of persons that I have worked with. And these are areas that trying to keep a pulse on what's going on with the youths, what's going on with families. I said, wait a minute. I know somebody in that area. Wait a minute. I know somebody in that area that can assist. And so just picked up the phone, started making calls, sending emails, and it just kind of went from there,
So the help that you seek is bringing the various resources in the community together to deal with various issues.
Definitely.
Instead of having one person dealing with all issues, you have many people dealing with various issues.
Right. And we're looking at school.
And you're helping the professionals that help the population.
Correct. Yes.
So so it's a strengthening of your professional base.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And I want it to be thought of. It's advocacy for helping professionals, and just like you said, strength. That's just another way of saying strengthening the people that help the community, the youths, the families, the couples, the individuals, the elderly, right? And so it's really twofold in that sense.
Okay. So what's going to be happening at the conference? What the expectation? What is the goal? What is your desired outcome?
Well, first of all, we did say it's the first annual Helping Professionals Conference, but I also want to introduce a theme. The theme for this year is Surviving the Odds. Children and families can overcome with our help. And that's really what's going to be the theme of the conference, recognizing that children and families that, and I don't want to use the word oppressed, but that are in crisis, that have challenges, they can overcome those challenges with the assistance of helping professionals. And so that's why I said it's twofold. The first piece of the conference definitely is to be able to, again, provide that resource for professionals here in the BVI. Again, school counselors, social workers, mental health. And one thing I wanted to add, it's not just for helping professionals, even though it's called that, but it's for anyone who work with children and families, clergy, a nonprofit organization persons, even yourself, because you're always interested in youth. You have a great philosophy on helping youth. You can come as well if you desire, if you so desire. But in terms of what we're going to see, it's really going to be a lot of knowledge-based. The topics that we're going to cover autism, attention deficit disorder, and all of the academic and social challenges that children have, and really looking at it from a school-based perspective. My presenter for that is Dr. Michelle Major. She's a colleague of mine from NASA, former colleague from Barry University, and she's a school psychologist, and she works over there in NASA. She has 2 nonprofit centers that she's a director of. So she has quite a bit of years working with children and families in those specific areas. So we're going to get a lot of knowledge about how do we understand autism. We've heard a lot about that. We've heard a lot about ADD, attention deficit, attention hyperactivity. She's going to really give a lot of information about that. Then the other topic we're going to be looking at is child abuse. April is also Child Abuse Awareness Month. And I'm bringing the family piece, domestic violence, because when you speak of child abuse, you can't leave out the domestic violence piece because they all go together. It's in the family. And another colleague of mine from Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Dr. Tara Jungerson, she's a professor there, and she has done a lot of work with families in trauma and in crisis, first responders. So she knows a lot about working in those crisis areas. So she'll be presenting on that. Then you have another colleague of mine from Barry University, Dr. Sylvia Fernandez. She will be speaking to really, we've said all this. How can we then implement policies and procedures? Because a lot of time you give all this information.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you don't get to the action.
We don't get to the action. And so she's an expert in that. She she travels on organizations for board standardization, accreditation. So she's really familiar with policies and procedures and implementing these things via those topics. So she'll be speaking to that. And of course, you can't forget myself. I'll be a presenter as well. I'll be presenting. How can we forget? Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be presenting on the family. That's my specialization. And just really maintaining the structure. And that's a passion of mine that I talk about a lot. Always, how can we maintain that family structure? And so...
And this is a 3-day conference.
It's a 3-day conference.
And it starts when?
It starts April 9th through 11th. I do have 2 more presenters. If do you want to take a break?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So those were the main presenters, and then we have the keynote speakers.
Okay.
The keynote speaker is her name is Jennifer Freeman, and she is really going to be speaking a lot to therapy and techniques. Now, this is a therapy called narrative therapy. It's been proven to be very effective with children, a lot of play with children, a lot of working with them, less, talking therapy. So she has written on that. She has a book out on that, presented on it several times. So she'll be speaking to that as the keynote speaker. And so basically, you asked me, what are they going to be getting? They're getting a lot of that knowledge on the first day. And then the second day is going to be application. Because a lot of time we go to these conferences and they tell us, oh, this is that. But how do I work with these children and families in these areas? And so I'm so excited that we're going to take pretty much the whole of that second day to really begin to show our attendees, this is how you do it. You know that song, this is how you do it?
Yeah.
This is how you do it.
The practical aspect.
The practical aspect, exactly. Application. So I really want attendees to know it's not going to just be knowledge-based and also how to gain policies and procedures, but also to how do I do this? How do I work with these families and children? So that's going to be a big part of that. And so I'm hoping that, with all of that over the 2-day period, that they will have had something. And again, these are people that I just can't say enough good about, because I know that they have, published books, published articles, presented all over the world. They know what they're talking
experts in
about.
their field.
They're experts in their field,
And now that's what 2 days, and
It's for 2 days.
you have it's a 3-day conference or 2-day.
It's a 3-day conference. Now you're getting me to the 9th. So we'll start on the 9th, and the 10th and the 11th, which is a Thursday and the Friday, will be the actual conference, the 2 days of it. Now the 9th, I'm so excited about the 9th, as you can tell from my smiling. I'm going to have a welcome ceremony, reception at Peter Island, because that's where it's going to be held. And I think I mentioned to you the conference, yes, is for locals, definitely, but also too because these presenters are coming from, as I said, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Bahamas, Los Angeles. We want to also have them promote the conference there. So I'm expecting to have persons from those areas as well. So we're going to have people coming in, so we have a welcome reception. I am so excited. I have booked and secured a gentleman by the name of Keon Dooling. For those of you that are listening that are familiar with basketball, he was the former NBA player of the Miami Heat back in 04-05 around Shaq and Dwayne Wade time. And so he is actually going to be the keynote speaker at the Welcome Conference on the 9th at Peter Island. And Mr. Dooling is a child abuse survivor. He was a child abuse survivor, and he has a foundation, the Respect Foundation. He's based in Fort Lauderdale, and he really has a lot of work doing with youths. He talks to them, he shares his story, very empowering. And so he will be the keynote speaker on that evening. Really, I think just really kicking off the conference and being a good start for the presenters. Again, showing that helping professionals can make a difference, one child and family at a time. He's an example of that. Someone that's been abused, and look at him now, so successful basketball player, So he will be the keynote speaker there. And one of the things, if we have more time, and again, I'm so excited, he is actually going to be doing a mini basketball camp. Here in the BVI, and we're working toward really putting that together. And
will that be in the complex?
That will be well. We're working on having it in a location that we think will be conducive to all of the districts. So what we're doing is we're working diligently to find the right location. We're working diligently to mobilize all the various people that need to be there. But it will definitely happen. And that is something that I think goes back to how is it going to help the BVI. One, it's helping the BVI for the professional piece of the conference on the 10th and 9th. But here's someone that has had a lot of practice working with children. I mean, he has his own foundation where he does that. And just really being able to participate and be the talent for this basketball camp and talk to these kids, motivate them, And again, they may not have to have been abused sexually, but something that may be hampering their development, pulling them down, their self-esteem, and him being that motivation, that inspiration for them, I think is just going to be phenomenal. So I'm very excited about that, very much looking forward to that. And that's going to be during the time when he's here, the Thursday.
Okay. So we need to save the date.
Yes, let's save the date, the 9th, 10th, and 11th
of April. Yes.
And
you said Peter Island.
It's on Peter Island.
And if the people want more information.
If you want more information, it's on my website. Everything's up there. It's www.samargecounseling.com. You go on my website. You're going to see a wonderful video of Peter Island. It's going to make you want to come. And you click on the link that says to learn more about the conference, and then it will take you there and just really take you into what's going to be happening. You can register right there online and everything. So
and they can call you.
And you can call me at 284-346-0662, or you can email me info@samargecounseling.com.
Okay,
Yes.
great. It
I
sounds
said
like
a mouthful.
yeah, it sounds like
Yes.
a great event.
It is. It's going to be
And-
wonderful.
And certainly we'll be hearing more about
We
it
will be hearing more about
in the
it.
weeks ahead.
In the weeks ahead, I hope I can come back closer, definitely to talk more about it and begin to promote it as we get closer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we could make
Yeah.
some space for you.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, that is Dr.
Yes.
Cindy George, and she's having a helping professional conference. It's coming up in April, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about it, I'm sure, and it's going to be a great asset to professionals in the territory, particularly in dealing with social issues, motivational issues surrounding those persons in our community who have one challenge or the other. So we need to look forward and plan for that upcoming conference. We're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to come back with Ms. Barbara Smith, community development person at social development, as well as Ms. Laurel Freeman. She's a social worker. We're going to be talking about parenting. Everything tonight is tied together. So you keep it locked right here. The Spotlight, don't move. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by Tortola Concrete Limited, Clarence Thomas Limited, and H. Lavity Stout Community College.